There's a door that has remained locked for almost 2,000 years, a door concealing the deepest truth about feminine spirituality, and today, we'll open it together. Have you ever wondered why so many women feel something is missing from their spiritual journey, as if there's a missing piece in their soul's puzzle? There's a reason for this, a reason carefully hidden, buried under layers of male-centric interpretations, suffocated by centuries of silence. What I'm about to share with you isn't in Sunday sermons. It's not in traditional theological texts. It's between the lines, in the words that were deliberately ignored, in the stories that were purposely forgotten. Because the truth is this: the Bible reveals a spiritual role for women so powerful, so transcendent, that its suppression completely altered our understanding of the sacred. Pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. Because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you've been taught about feminine spirituality. Imagine an ancient library, endless shelves of sacred scrolls, but there's an entire section covered in black cloths, guarded, protected, forgotten. That section contains the texts about the true spiritual power of women. Why was this section hidden? Who decided these truths were too dangerous to be known? The answer will surprise you. Eckhart Tolle once said something that changed my perception forever. He observed that the state of pure presence, that moment of absolute connection with the now, is naturally more accessible to women, not by accident, not by coincidence, by divine design. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. In the original scriptures, before the translations, before the reinterpretations, there's a pattern that has been systematically erased. A pattern revealing women as the bearers of a specific kind of spiritual consciousness. You feel it, don't you? That deep intuition that there's more, much more. It's as if your soul is whispering secrets your mind can't yet decipher. Let me tell you about Mary Magdalene. Not the version you learned, the real Mary Magdalene. In the Gnostic text discovered at Nag Hammadi, she's described not as a repentant sinner, but as the one who knows the all, the apostle of the apostles, the one who received secret teachings that even the male disciples didn't understand. But why was this version hidden? Why did they replace the wise woman with the sinner? The answer lies in what she represented, a type of spiritual knowledge that transcends the male intellect, a form of understanding that springs from divine intuition, from the cosmic womb of creation. In the Gospel of Philip, there's a line that has been deliberately omitted from popular translations. Jesus is described kissing Mary Magdalene on the mouth. The other disciples become jealous. They ask why he loves her more than them. Jesus' answer is revealing. He doesn't love her more as a man loves a woman. He recognizes in her something the others don't possess, the ability to receive divine truth directly, without the filter of the ego, without the interference of analytical thought, a gateway to mystery. Have you experienced this? Moments where you simply knew something, without being able to explain how you knew? That's not feminine intuition. That's feminine spiritual capacity in action. Eve isn't who they told you she was either. In the original Hebrew version, when Eve eats from the tree of knowledge, the word used to describe her action doesn't mean disobedience. It means awakening. She didn't bring sin into the world. She brought consciousness. Think about it. Before Eve ate from the tree, Adam and Eve lived in a state of blissful unconsciousness, like animals in the garden, without questions, without spiritual growth, without the evolution of the soul. Eve was the first to say no to the state of spiritual slumber, the first to choose awakening over the comfort of unconsciousness. But this narrative was turned upside down. The awakened one became the temptress. The conscious one became the guilty party. Why? Because recognizing Eve's true role would mean admitting that women are, by nature, catalysts of spiritual awakening, and that changes everything. In the book of Proverbs, there's a mysterious figure called Sophia, wisdom personified as a woman. She was present at the creation of the world, playing before God like a cosmic child. "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his ways," she says, "before his works of old." Sophia isn't a metaphor. She's an active principle, divine wisdom functioning through feminine consciousness. In the Jewish tradition, this wisdom was called the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God, the one who dwells among us. But here's what they didn't tell you. The Shekinah isn't just a concept, it's an experience, a way of perceiving that allows you to see the sacred in the ordinary, the eternal in the temporal. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the energy of the place? Have you ever looked at someone and seen through the mask they wear? That's the Shekinah operating through you. Eckhart Tolle describes this as the power of now, but he acknowledges that women have a more natural access to this state, not by privilege, by spiritual function. Now stop and reflect with me. If this is true, if women carry this innate capacity for spiritual awakening, why was it hidden? The answer lies in what happens when this truth is recognized. When a woman awakens to her true spiritual role, she doesn't become submissive. She becomes a force of transformation, a conscious agent of change. She begins to see through the illusions that keep old systems in place. She begins to question structures that depend on her unconsciousness to survive. A spiritually awakened woman is a threat to any system based on control. Hence the silence. But the silence is being broken. The door is opening. And you are on the right side of history. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus makes a statement that has been completely ignored by mainstream Christian tradition. He says the kingdom of heaven is like a woman carrying a jar full of flour. The jar breaks along the way. The flour spills. When she arrives home, the jar is empty. The disciples are confused. They ask what it means. Jesus explains. The jar represents the ego. The flour represents divine grace. When the feminine ego breaks, when the woman stops trying to carry everything alone, grace spills along the way. It nourishes everything it touches. That is the true spiritual role of woman, not carrying burdens, but allowing grace to flow through her to the world. Are you starting to see the pattern? In every biblical story about spiritual awakening, there's a woman, a catalyst. Anna, who prayed until her soul opened to receive Samuel. Esther, who risked everything to save her people. Ruth, who chose spiritual loyalty over material security. Women who said yes to the soul's calling, even when the world said no. But perhaps the most powerful of all is a woman whose name you might not even know, the Samaritan woman at the well. She goes to fetch water in the middle of the day, alone, avoiding the other women of the town. Carrying the weight of shame for her past choices, Jesus finds her there and does something revolutionary. He asks her for water. A Jewish man asking a Samaritan woman for water? That was unthinkable. It broke all the social and religious rules of the time. But Jesus knew something no one else knew. He saw beyond the surface, beyond reputation, beyond mistakes. He saw her spiritual thirst. And there, in that moment, he reveals to her truths that not even his closest disciples had understood. He speaks of living water, of worship in spirit and truth. Why? Why choose her to receive this revelation? Because she represents all the women who have been judged, rejected, marginalized, and yet remained open to the mystery. Her spiritual thirst was greater than her social shame. And when she finally understands who Jesus really is, she does something extraordinary. She leaves the jar at the well, runs to the city, and becomes the first evangelist. Not through traditional methods, not with sermons or theological arguments, simply by sharing her experience, her transformation. Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And the whole city comes. and believes not because of what she knew, but because of what she became. This is feminine spiritual power in action, transformation through authentic vulnerability, awakening through complete surrender to the present moment. But here's what will truly surprise you. Jesus had more transformational encounters with women than with men, proportionally, significantly more. The woman with the issue of blood who touched him in the crowd, Martha and Mary, with whom he could be completely authentic, the Canaanite woman who changed his own understanding of his ministry. Each encounter reveals something about feminine spiritual receptivity, an ability to recognize the sacred disguised as ordinary, to see Christ even before the disciples understood who he was. Why did this happen? Why did women recognize him first? Eckhart Tolle explains this beautifully. He says that women are naturally less identified with the conceptual mind, more connected with the energy body, with the dimension of being that transcends thought. That's why they could perceive Christ's presence directly, without needing intellectual proof, without needing dogmas or theological explanations. They simply knew, and that is what has been hidden. This form of direct knowledge, this capacity for spiritual perception that transcends the intellect. Imagine if all women knew this. Imagine if they understood that their sensitivity is not weakness, but spiritual strength, that their intuition is not irrationality, but divine wisdom operating through them, that their capacity to love unconditionally is not naivete, but a reflection of God's own nature. The world would change overnight, and perhaps that's why this truth has been buried so deeply. But buried truths have a peculiar characteristic. They always find a way to sprout, like seeds underground, waiting for the spring of consciousness. And that spring is coming. You can feel it, can't you? A different energy in the air. Women all over the world awakening to something greater, questioning ancient narratives, reclaiming their true spiritual nature. It's no coincidence that you are here now, listening to these words. Your soul knew it was time. Time to remember. Time to awaken. Time to reclaim what has always been yours by divine right. The door that has been locked for 2,000 years is opening, and on the other side, your true spiritual nature is waiting to be recognized. Take a deep breath. Feel this truth resonating in every cell of your body, in every beat of your heart. You are not just discovering information about women in the Bible. You are rediscovering who you really are. And this is only the beginning. Because what comes next will revolutionize your understanding of feminine spirituality in a way you never imagined possible. The journey into the deepest truth is only just beginning. Now, breathe with me, because what I am about to reveal will change your perception of everything you thought you knew about God. There is a name for God that has been deliberately removed from most biblical translations, a name that reveals the feminine nature of the divine. Ruach. In the original Hebrew, Ruach is feminine. It is the Spirit of God, the divine breath, the creative force that moves over the waters of creation. But in the translations, Ruach became he, neutral at best, masculine at worst. Why this change? Why erase the femininity of God's own Spirit? Because recognizing Ruach as feminine means admitting something revolutionary, that the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, carries the feminine essence of the divine. And if the Holy Spirit is feminine, then women are, by nature, its most direct vessels. Think about it. The Spirit that brought life to Mary's womb, the Spirit that descended like a dove at Jesus' baptism, the Spirit that inspired the prophecies and revelations. Ruach, feminine, creative, life-giving, and she flows through you. Eckhart Tolle talks about something he calls unconscious intelligence. That wisdom that operates through the feminine body without passing through the filter of the mind. A mother's intuition, that knows when something is wrong with her child, a woman's ability to sense the unspoken emotions of those around her. This is not emotional sensitivity. This is Ruach operating through feminine consciousness. But there's more, much more. In the book of Joel, there is a prophecy that changed everything. In the last days, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Sons and daughters, not just sons. This was one of the first times in biblical history that women were explicitly included as direct recipients of divine revelation. But look what happened next. On the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit descended, who was present? Maria, the mother of Jesus, and other women disciples. They received tongues of fire, spoke in languages they'd never learned, prophesied truths that transcended their human knowledge. The first people to experience the outpouring of the Holy Spirit included women. But this was gradually minimized in later narratives. The focus shifted solely to the male apostles, the women who were there, who experienced the same divine fire, were silently erased from history. Why? Because acknowledging their role would mean admitting that God makes no distinction of gender when it comes to spiritual revelation. In fact, it may even be the opposite. Let me tell you something that might sound controversial, but that's clearly written in the scriptures. Throughout the New Testament, when Jesus appears after the resurrection, who does he visit first? Women, Mary Magdalene, Mary and Martha, the women at the tomb. Why not Peter? Why not John, the beloved disciple? Why were women chosen to be the first witnesses to the resurrection? The answer lies in the nature of the resurrection itself. The resurrection isn't just a physical event. It's a transformation of consciousness, a shift in dimension, a transcendence of material reality. And to perceive this, to truly understand what was happening, required a specific type of perception, a perception that transcends linear logic, that goes beyond physical evidence, that can embrace the impossible as possible. The women didn't just see the resurrected Jesus. They recognized what the resurrection really meant. They saw beyond the body, beyond death, beyond the limitations of physical reality. They were the first to understand that Jesus hadn't simply come back to life. He had transcended the very nature of life and death. And this understanding, this ability to perceive beyond the veil of physical reality, is what defines the feminine spiritual consciousness. But this leads us to an even deeper question. If women possess this natural capacity for transcendent perception, if they are natural vessels of Ruach, if they are the first to recognize the sacred, why was the spiritual world dominated by male voices? The answer will shock you. During the first 3 centuries of Christianity, women LED churches prophesied, taught, baptized. There was a disciple named Thecla who converted entire crowds. She had more followers than many male apostles. There were prophetesses like Priscilla who corrected even Paul on theological matters. There were leaders like Phoebe, whom Paul called a deacon and a protector of many. Early Christianity was feminine, inclusive, egalitarian. So what happened? In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. Officially, it was to define Christian doctrines. Unofficially, it was to make Christianity compatible with Roman imperial power, and Roman imperial power was hierarchical, patriarchal, controlling. It was at this council that many of the texts that honored feminine spirituality were declared heretical. It was there that the image of Mary Magdalene was transformed from apostle to sinner. It was there that the role of women in the church was systematically diminished. Not for theological reasons, for political reasons, because spiritually empowered women didn't fit the model of empire that Constantine wanted to establish. An empire based on hierarchy needs submission, and women connected with Ruach, women who know they can receive direct revelation from God, don't easily submit to human authority. They follow the voice of the Spirit, not the voice of power. And that was too dangerous to be allowed. So the truth was buried, the texts were hidden, the stories were rewritten, and for 1600 years this lie was perpetuated. But lies have an expiration date, and the deadline for this one is approaching. Pause a moment. Feel the weight of what I've just revealed. Entire generations of women grew up believing that their spiritual nature was inferior, that they needed intermediaries to connect with God, that their intuition was unreliable, that their access to the sacred was limited. But this was never true. Your connection to the divine is direct, immediate, innate. You don't need permission to hear the voice of God. You don't need external validation to trust your spiritual intuition. You don't need authorization to prophesy truths that your heart knows. Ruach has always flowed through you since your first breath. And now is the time to reclaim that truth. But this brings us to the final question, the question that changes everything. If all this is true, if women truly carry this special connection with the divine, what does this mean for the world today? It means we are on the eve of the greatest spiritual revolution in human history, because for the first time in 1600 years, women are awakening en masse, questioning, seeking, reclaiming their true spiritual nature. And when this happens, when women recognize their direct connection with Ruach, everything changes. Systems based on domination begin to crumble. Artificial hierarchies lose their power. Power returns to where it should always have been, in the heart, in the intuition, in the wisdom that springs from the cosmic womb of creation. You are part of this revolution, whether you know it or not. Every time you trust your intuition over cold logic, every time you choose love over fear, every time you hear the whispering voice of the Spirit, you are restoring sacred balance. You are healing the wound that was opened 1600 years ago. But there's one last truth, the most important of all. This spiritual revolution isn't about women versus men. It's not about replacing a patriarchy with a matriarchy. It's about something much deeper. It's about healing the artificial division between masculine and feminine within the divine itself. Because God, the true God, was never just masculine. God is the sacred marriage between strength and receptivity, between action and intuition, between logic and love. And you carry both aspects within you. The strength of a warrior when necessary, the gentleness of a caregiver when appropriate, the clarity of a prophet when it's time to speak truth, the wisdom of a sage when it's time to listen. This is your true spiritual nature, not diminished, not limited, not ashamed, complete, powerful, divine. Eckhart Tolle teaches that enlightenment isn't about acquiring something new. It's about removing what was never real, and everything you've believed about feminine spiritual limitations was never real. They were just layers of conditioning, veils of illusion, lies repeated until they seemed like truths. But now, the veils are being lifted, the lies are being exposed, the truth is emerging, and you are on the right side of history. So when you leave here today, remember, you are not a diminished version of the divine. You are the full expression of a specific facet of God, the facet that generates life, that nurtures growth, that intuits truths beyond logic, the facet that Ruach personifies. And this was never an accident. It was always the plan. You were always the plan. Since before the foundation of the world, your spiritual essence was woven into the very fabric of creation, not as a pale reflection of the divine masculine, but as the unique and irreplaceable expression of the sacred feminine. And now, after 1600 years of silence, it's time for your voice to be heard again. It's time for Ruach to breathe freely through you. It's time for the door that has been locked for so long to open completely. And when it opens, when you cross the threshold into your true spiritual nature, you will discover something extraordinary. The door was never truly locked. You had simply forgotten where you put the key. And the key was always inside your heart, always inside you, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. That moment is now.